Thank you for joining us for another segment of the Strategic Risk Mind podcast. This is Joe Anderson, your host with Fortify Risk Management. Today, I'm joined by Nick Burrows. He's the principal technical and security architect for a great company called Total Care IT. And Nick, can you tell us a little bit about your background
Mhm.
and a little bit about what your company offers in the marketplace?
Yeah, my background, I studied computer science, graduated over 20 years ago, started professionally with a nonprofit organization as their IT manager. While I was working in that role, I earned my master's in business administration. And that was when I began to find a more holistic view of how IT and strategy and management all work together. I moved
Mm-hmm.
in the nonprofit over to the program side for several years.
Okay.
I worked for a charter school as their CFO and business manager for a couple of years, and then I came
Mm-hmm.
back to IT, working with Total Care IT. And here I've done everything from working on our support tickets to um, running the client facing side of our organization. And now I am largely responsible for the technical and security direction of the organization, setting the
Okay.
frameworks and policies that we're going to use to leverage the services we provide to our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to Total Care and what we are as a managed services provider, which is basically we're provide outsourced IT solutions for small and mid-sized businesses.
Okay.
So we're the small businesses IT department, basically, for often less than, if not the same, of what you'd pay just an IT person in your salary and fringe. You can get a team of people who have a shared collection of expertise. You
Mm-hmm.
get our tool set, our framework, our security implementation to provide a holistic um, uh, protection and a holistic service level, so to address your IT needs, your cybersecurity needs, and really your business planning needs,
Okay.
from an IT perspective.
Man, that's really comprehensive. I know we work with you guys,
Mhm.
um, and have had some great experiences there. So we will recommend you guys for sure. And I think it's just a great background you have, Nick. I thought that was fascinating, kind of, not only working in the tech space, but also business management, working with some nonprofits. It gives you kind of a lot of roundedness to be able to approach problem solving from and really work with
Yeah,
clients. And so that's really cool.
yeah. I think that it's one of those things that is not always common in the IT space, having somebody who's worked holistically and outside of just the nuts and bolts and the ones and zeros of IT.
Hmm.
And I think that it's something that makes, I like to think it makes Total Care a little bit unique, but I think that it also makes having conversations like what we're going to have today a slightly
Hmm.
different twist than what you might normally have just speaking to somebody about cybersecurity and risk. So,
Sure, that makes sense. Well, that's great. I'm really excited to get started here. So,
yeah.
um, you know, you mentioned this topic to me that's just been kind of intriguing me over the last little bit here of this concept of a human firewall, and kind of the
Yes.
the point that you told me is that it's estimated 80% of cyber instances involve a human firewall. So what in the world is a human firewall? And also tell us a little bit about ways that we can reduce risk um, involving this human firewall.
Yeah. So the in IT space, the firewall is what's on your edge. You've got the public internet, and then you have your
Mm.
local network, and the firewall is what separates the public internet from your local network. And
Okay.
so that's kind of like from a security standpoint, the firewall is almost like a single point of failure. It's the or, maybe not the single point of failure. It is the first layer of your defensive depth. And
Okay.
so you want to make sure your firewall is secure. Um, over the last 5 years, especially, but a little bit before that. But with COVID, when the workforce became remote and hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
the physical firewall became less important,
I see.
because people were mobile. People started working everywhere, where they worked from
Mm-hmm.
home, they worked from coffee shops, they worked from hotels, they worked from airports.
Yeah.
And so the firewall travels now with the individual. It's not always you plug into your office network and that is where you start your
Mm-hmm.
security. And so at that point, the firewall is where you have to start your defense. And so the human firewall is really, how do you create an awareness? How do you create judgment so that the human element of your IT, the people receiving the emails, the people going to websites, the people initiating financial transactions, are being smart about what they're doing, and making sure that they're not making mistakes that can be really detrimental or debilitating to a business. Some of them could cripple a business. Um,
That's such a great explanation, and I want to tap into something you mentioned there.
yeah,
That's really interesting. So, this concept of not just training people to obey rules, but
mhm,
really training people in a dynamic environment
yeah,
to be a cybersecurity problem solver,
yeah,
somebody that can adapt as they're in different environments to try to create a secure firewall kind of a scenario for that environment.
yeah. It's we're at a point where not where everybody in the business has to have some level of judgment,
Hmm.
and discretion when it comes to what they're allowing in. You click on the wrong website, you can download the malware. If you don't
Hmm.
have the right security posture, that malware can then start to spread. Now, if you're on your physical network, this is what happened all the time back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Someone would download a virus and then that virus would spread through the network. They called it a worm.
Hmm.
Um, but but now what you're doing is what the malware does now is it's giving people remote access or command and control access to a device. And instead of it being an automated just seeking out what it can find on the network, you have individuals who now have a background access to a
Hmm.
console on the network, and they're using it to try to traverse laterally. And so if you're on a physical network, the human factor is what's allowing people in more likely than them brute forcing or finding a vulnerability at that physical edge that they
Hmm.
used to find. If you're remote, especially nowadays, if you're remote, it's even more important to have strong internal controls, and it's even more important to have strong processes and strong awareness training, because it's if you've got a bookkeeper who's working in a different state and they
Hmm.
get the wrong email because somebody's account got compromised and they think they're communicating with the CEO who's saying, hey, we need to send a wire transfer to this vendor. Do
Yeah.
you have the processes in place, and do you have the trust in place for that bookkeeper to think, I should verify this and not feel threatened to ask? Because
Yeah.
that's a very real
Interesting.
possibility. Like, you get urgency, you get a message, you think it's the boss,
Hmm.
and we're conditioned to just say, oh, the boss asked me to do this. Well, now we have to break that conditioning, because we have to have scrutiny, we have to have skepticism,
Hmm.
and say, before I initiate this transaction, I need to triple check, maybe
Hmm.
quadruple check that this is actually something that I'm supposed to be doing. And if you got the request over email, it's about picking up the telephone or
Yeah.
texting or doing something different. So you're not using the same way to communicate back and forth, because that's where those compromises are happening.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you after this next question, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a little heads up so you can think about it. But I'm going
Okay.
to ask you for a claims example of something that happened while in your tenure that you can share
Mhm.
with us. But before we get into that, what are some best practices? Give me two or three around security awareness while you're traveling. I
Well,
think that's on everybody's mind is like, how do I know what what networks are secure, what I should be doing in a hotel, or all these things. And I just thought maybe give us a top 3 to 5 of what are some
Yeah.
things we can do.
Well, while you're traveling, it's really important to know what network you're connecting to, or have a level of privacy. There are two ways that you can really get privacy on your personal device. A lot of people will use a VPN service, and they connect to a VPN, and that's going to do is it's going to take all of the traffic from their device, encrypt it, so that even if I'm on a public network where there's somebody listening, they're not getting the data that I'm actually transmitting. They're getting ciphered data. The other thing that other alternative to using those VPN services, if you're a business person and you're working with a corporation, you can use what's called a secure access software edge, and that's kind of the same thing. It uses that same type of technology where it encrypts your traffic, but it allows you to also it routes all of the traffic through a known IP address or a known gateway, the edge device. And so it's routing everything from wherever you are, whatever public network you're on, whether it's in your hotel room, the airport, a coffee shop, your home network. It's routing it all through a known service provider. And through that, it can be scanned for malware, both in and
I see.
it can be scanned for content filtering, so you're not getting going to malicious and dangerous websites. DNS, or the address book, can be secure, so you're not you think you're going to website X, but you're really going to somebody's bad webpage, and things like that. So,
interesting. And what was that second one called again?
It's called SASE, SASE, or Secure Access Software Edge, or Service Edge. Secure Access Service Edge.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, those are two really good ones. Anything else you can think of for people traveling that maybe it's not about how they connect, maybe it's something else with their devices or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's some obvious there's some big ones. Don't use public chargers. Make sure you bring your own plug. Don't plug into any of the USB devices you see at airports or anything like that. Unless you know what that device is, you shouldn't connect to it, because that's there's lots of instances of those public chargers inserting malware on your devices. So if you go to charge your phone, you could be getting malware. Your phone could then suddenly be mirrored for somebody else, and so you go to access your bank account, and now all of a sudden they have access to your resources. The other thing that just in general, traveling aside, really, there's a concept called password hygiene that's really difficult to convince people to do. But there are several factors that people should keep in mind for protecting their information in their bubble. This applies professionally. This applies personally, and that's within password hygiene. And there's a handful of tips that I would say we really should follow. You want long passwords, at least 12 or 13 characters. It's hard to remember, I know. You want complex passwords, which means you're using multiple character types: uppercase letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. Longer is better, though. If you're going to create a password, longer and simple is better than shorter and complex.
Okay.
But the other thing that's really important for people from a security standpoint is to make sure that they're not using the same password across different websites and different services. So, because if you would use the same password at Target as you use on your bank, well, Target had a breach years ago, but they had a breach, and if you're using that same password at Target, now a bad actor, if they can figure out that you bank at this bank, they could possibly access your bank account.
That's right.
Or it makes it easier for them to access the bank account. And so,
interesting.
And so what we recommend, because when you think about, I have to have long passwords, complex passwords, and I have to have a different password for every single website or every single service, that's overwhelming. And so what we recommend is people use a password manager. Those password managers can create these completely complex random character passwords. I don't think I know any of my own passwords. And if I don't know them, then I certainly can't. They can't be socially engineered. But if you are creating your own passwords, also make sure you're not using like your grandkids or your kids or your pets' names, because you post about those things on social media. And that's what, you know, that's what they call open source intelligence. And so if
Yeah.
you're being targeted, people are going to look at your social media, see what you're posting, and they're going to be like, oh, you've got a grandkid named Johnny. Well, I'm going to start doing Johnny as my dictionary for trying to guess your password. And
So this is a good point, and I want to bring up something that's a skill of mine. I tend to be somewhat of a random person and I have random thoughts, and
yeah,
that's actually pretty good for password development.
oh, it is. It is. Yeah.
But speaking of random, I want to
Yes.
hold this up. So this, if you guys can see this, is a RFID card.
Yes.
And that's something else that's pretty smart to have when you're traveling because some of the chip data on your credit cards can get stolen by people
Yeah.
remotely. And so there's these different tools that Nick's talking about that really make sense to stay up to date on. Great ideas, Nick. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
kind of flipping another lid on the random side, I'm going to ask you, because you told me that solving or mitigating cyber risk, not solving, but mitigating is like solving a Rubik's Cube. So help me
Sure is.
understand that.
Okay. So first, I'm going to tell a story about why I learned to solve a Rubik's Cube. And this was probably
Okay.
about 10 years ago. My son was in second grade,
Uh-huh.
and his second grade teacher had the whole classroom decorated like Rubik's Cubes. They
Okay.
had Rubik's Cubes on every little like group of 4 desks and everything. And she challenged all of these 7, 8-year-olds to learn to solve a Rubik's Cube. We're going to learn to solve Rubik's Cubes this year. Now, I don't know about you, but I pick up a Rubik's Cube and everything, and I mess it around, and I might be able to get one side, but never be able to solve it. And so I would just like, I think up until this point, the only way I'd ever solved a Rubik's Cube was taking the stickers off. So my 7-year-old's like, I really want to become a cube master. That's what they would call it and everything. And I'm like, okay. So I jump on YouTube and I start learning how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Okay.
And I did it for one reason to help my son. And deep down, it was probably also because there was no way I was going to let my 7-year-old do something like that if I couldn't.
Yeah.
It was a little pride thing. But so I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And if you give me a Rubik's Cube mixed up, I'm not a speed cuber. I can't do it in 14 seconds or whatever, but within a couple minutes I can solve it, and it's following the same 7 steps every single time. There's 7 algorithms that I memorized. I recognize what those patterns are, so I can execute the algorithm. And risk mitigation from a cybersecurity standpoint is the exact same thing. It's knowing the things that you should put in place in order to make your business that much more robust and that much more protected. And they center around security centers around 3 different types of controls. There's administrative controls, technical controls, and physical controls. And so the first thing that you want to do as a business to mitigate risk is you want to make sure your administrative controls are in place. You want to make sure that you have the policies and procedures and have been creating the culture that is going to foster a positive, secure environment. So you have to have an acceptable use policy. If you're going to allow people to bring their own devices, then you need to have a bring your own device policy. BYOD is what we call it. If you're not going to allow people to connect their personal devices onto a corporate network, then you need the BYOD policy to say you're not allowed to. So that way, if someone's bringing their personal phone and they're connecting it to the corporate Wi-Fi, then you have teeth to be like, hey, we're not going to allow this, because that's a vulnerability and that's a risk. You're allowing personal devices to commingle, and you really don't want to allow that if you're going for best practices. From a risk management standpoint, you need to have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. You need to have defined how much downtime can we afford in the event that, whether it's a power outage, a tornado, a hurricane, or ransomware, how much downtime can we afford, and what is our plan in the event that something like this happens?
That's really good. Really important.
So you need to have those things in place. You need to have an incident response plan so that you know, hey, at what point do we say that this was an incident versus this was a breach? And who do we communicate with? Do we have our insurance provider documented? Do we have our attorney documented? Do we have our PR people documented? Like, who are we working with to be able to control messaging and make sure that we're checking all of the boxes? And so that's kind of the first step, is laying the foundation with all of the administrative controls that you need as a business to be able to create that culture to mitigate risk.
That's great.
And then from there, you're able to say, okay, the administrative controls are protecting us to this level. Now we need the technical controls so that we can have kind of our burglar alarm. You put in what's called an EDR system, which is, a lot of them have what's called an antivirus solution, or next gen antivirus is what they call it now. And then EDR. So then the next gen antivirus will stop the bad thing from running. The EDR is going to track if something bad is running, or if something bad exists. And so it's out there looking and tracking and logging and everything. So you need both of those things. Ideally, your EDR then plugs into a SOC service so that if there is a bad thing on the network, you have 24/7 eyes on it that can notify you. And so you're able to then receive notice that there's something bad happening. And ideally, you then take advantage of automations and say, hey, if this bad thing is happening, these are the things that I want to do in order to protect myself. And they call that security orchestration and automated response, or SOAR. And you want to implement SOAR. And those are all technical controls. This is where you would use software to maybe manage who has admin rights and things like that. This is where you would implement an email filter to stop spam and phishing and malware from being delivered to the inbox, so that the human firewall is less significant because they're not being faced with as many of the decisions, but they still need to be aware of it, because with generative AI and with the sophistication of the bad guys, they're making things every single day that are bypassing those filters.
Wow.
And so that's where your technical controls come in. And then depending on your business model, in a lot of the distributed workforces, the physical controls become less important. But if you do have a corporate office and you do have any type of servers, or you have any type of files, a locked filing cabinet is a physical control. Making sure that any server equipment, your backups, are locked up so that they can't be accessed just by anybody. Making sure you have visitor logs and visitor policies. Those are all part of, and what happens if someone comes in, like how are you screening a person before they can enter, or they have to be accompanied? Those are the physical controls. And so
that's great. So you have these different kinds of controls, right? And then like where does like testing come in play? Like, testing to make sure the controls are working, like, or some of these things that I know we engage with you guys on.
Probably the most common way that you would test it would be what they call tabletop exercises. And I know that Fortify, the risk management's familiar with tabletop exercises. It's going through a scenario and then discussing and bringing the people who would be involved in that scenario in, and testing your controls and testing, hey, we have this policy and procedure. Are we following this policy and procedure? Do people know it well enough, or are people able to refer to it at least in the event that X happens? And that's probably the best way to do it from a risk management, because the faster you can get on top of something happening, the less exposure you're going to have.
Yeah, so you got that kind of a test where you're running a simulation where something's already happened. You also have like penetration testing and people that can hack in and try to break stuff on purpose, right? So that we can see how the systems all play together, because you're talking about multiple systems to protect your cyberspace. And I think that's fascinating.
And penetration testing is a huge thing, and there's several components to penetration testing. There's a framework called the MITRE framework, and that kind of it's a government funded framework that talks about the different ways that you want to make sure that you're the different ways that a compromise could spread, and the different ways that a compromise can be a bad guy can access that. And so,
Okay.
if you engage with a company to do a full pen testing, they're going to, in many regards, follow this MITRE ATT&CK framework, and they're going to be looking through. They're going to be testing your firewall and your physical ports. But from the human firewall perspective, they're going to be scouring every single employee's social media, and they're going to be sending phishing messages, and they're going to be targeting, and they're going to see who are we able to exploit. And then what happens from there is if your physical firewall or your human firewall has compromised, then they're going to start figuring out what they're able to get access to. It's not just looking to see if there's a hole. It is looking to see how deep they can dive down that hole. And,
I see.
And that is it's a fairly time-consuming process, and it requires a huge level of expertise. But it's definitely something that at least on an annual basis, a business should engage a company in doing a full penetration test, just to make sure that they've shored up, that they know where their exposure is, so that they can shore that up, and they can, whether it's provide more awareness training, better training, strengthen internal controls, whatever needs to happen.
So I want to kind of get to kind of a final question here and summarize a little bit too. But a lot of the services you guys provide are going to be mapping out, managing, reducing risk on the cyber side, and along with providing some consulting services on the types of equipment to use and things like that. But then you have the whole side of insurance, which a lot of the insurance brokers we work with are very familiar with, and those policies are fairly complex.
Yes.
And it's kind of cool to get like the cyber IT guys, if you have your own team or you want to use an outsourced firm like Total Care IT, to get them connected with the insurance guys, because the cool stuff you're talking about, I couldn't really articulate if I was filling out an app. And then the problem is that the underwriter's looking for that stuff and they don't see it in there. And so they charge you more premium or they give you less coverage. And I think it's a really good way to kind of, one, evidence that you have controls in place. And that can be a marketing or sales tool, not just with your insurance premium, but also with your clients. And you can project out, hey, we are investing in our cybersecurity because we care about your information, and we're doing everything we possibly can within reason to be able to keep your information secure. And I think that's a huge confidence boost for people to do business with you.
It is. It's actually twofold though as well. When you talk about the insurance, one is if you have if you have those security controls in place, then you're able to confidently answer those questionnaires, and it's going to lower your insurance premiums. We base a lot of the technology, the decisions, and the direction that we are going in as far as the services we offer around what we know cybersecurity insurance is going to require. They require EDR, they require email filtering, they require they have a list of requirements, and that's how we make a decision as far as like these are the things we're including in our packaging. But the other thing about it that's important is for businesses that don't necessarily have those things in place, if you're saying that, yes, I have multi-factor authentication, and then you get a breach and you put in that claim to the insurance is going to hire an incident response firm. That firm's going to come investigate. And if they don't find that multi-factor authentication was enabled, they're going to deny the claim.
Wow.
And so it's not just being able to lower your insurance premiums with confidence. It's also being able to know that in the event that the bad thing happens that you buy insurance for, you're still protected. Because if you didn't do the dot the I's and cross the T's that you said you did, then the insurance company is going to come around and they're going to say, you know what, we're sorry it happened, but we're not going to honor this claim because you didn't do the things you said you were going to do.
That's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think, what's interesting to me is just you kind of peeled the onion back for us a little bit in
Yeah.
sharing with us all of the different ways that you guys work with companies to help secure their online environment and train them to be cybersecurity problem solvers, which I think is a huge takeaway from today. So thank you, Nick, for doing
Yeah.
that. And I'm just really excited to kind of brainstorm with you guys. Total Care IT is a partner for Fortify Risk Management, and that means we have a prearranged agreement to be able to work together as we do with our other partners. And I think it's just kind of fun because when we talk about risk management, ours is a little bit more general, and we're looking at overall risk. And do we touch on cyber? Sure, but we're not cyber experts, and so we can bring people in like you that can go, hey, here's an expertise, here's someone that's kind of been there and done that and can kind of walk you down the path and help you avoid some of the pitfalls that may present themselves along the way.
Yeah.
And that's really sweet. Well, Nick, I'm going to give you the last word. So if you have any, kind of summary tips or anything like that, but before we do that, I actually just remembered we wanted to get kind of a claim scenario from you. So in a
Yeah.
few minutes, give us a claim scenario of something that's happened that kind of is something that might be new or interesting for our listeners.
Um, yeah. So the biggest thing that we've seen, we have seen malware and we have seen ransomware and everything, but that's the fact that ransomware has become less about encrypting your data and keeping it, holding it hostage, and more about, hey, we've downloaded your data and we're going to sell it if you don't pay the ransom. That's interesting. But the things that I think are probably the most poignant are how people have been socially engineered and manipulated through email fraud. Business email compromise is probably the biggest thing, the biggest risk. And this is where that human factor once again comes in.
So walk us through, have you seen that with your companies? Walk us through just an example. You don't have to tell us the details, but try to walk us through a live example while shielding some of the confidentiality.
There was a company was working with their clients to work with their financial portfolio, kind of doing some year-end adjustments, saying, hey, you know what, your portfolio is this. We're going to be moving some investments from this investment to this investment. So we need to initiate a wire transfer from this bank to this bank.
Okay.
Someone had in that network of communication, it was probably like a 3 or 4 rung chain of communication. Someone had intercepted a message and sent the client who was sending the wire transfer instructions saying, oh, we've changed the financial institution of the we need to wire this money to.
Wow.
And the client then sent the money to the wrong bank because of the form that was sent to them. And so that was a very real example, and it was not an insignificant amount of money, and it was just one of those things that being busy, constant diligence, deadlines, they all make these things more and more real. That was
probably involving some retirement money or something, right?
Probably, it's probably somebody's retirement money.
And so that's a real impact to a lot of people. That's very interesting because those aren't the ones you hear on the news a lot, right? You hear about, Best Buy or Target getting breached or something, right? And it's like you don't hear about these ones, but these ones have, retirement assets are big for people.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to live on in retirement. So, very fascinating. Well, that's really helpful, Nick. This has been great, and we'll have to, chime this up down the road for some new updates. But I really appreciate your time. And I'll give you the last word now. If you have anything you want to just encourage people, one kind of thought to kind of keep in mind, what would that be?
I think that the biggest thing that I would leave people with is trust but verify. You want to make sure that, like when you're working in the business community, you want to be able to trust the people you're working with, but it's never a bad thing to ask a question. It's never a bad thing. It really comes down to that old adage that teachers would say that students never wanted to listen to. There's no such thing as a dumb question.
Mm.
And if something doesn't feel right, get that verification before you act on it.
Yeah, that's great. Well,
So,
this has been the Strategic Risk Mind podcast by Fortify Risk Management. I'm your host, Joe Anderson. We want to thank our guest, Nick Burrows from Total
yep.
Care IT. It's been a blast. Thanks, Nick, and we'll see you next time for the next episode. Have a great day.
Right. Thanks.